We all know the benefits of physical exercise on our mental health. But when we're anxious, self-conscious, or we're struggling with life's challenges, going to the gym and working out can be the last thing on our mind. Taking that first step can be really tough, not knowing where to go, what gear to use, or how to use it. Well, our Rich has come up with a solution called the Safe Space Project to try and help with this. We're getting into more gyms in York and collaborating on making them a more welcoming environment for you, regardless of where you are in your fitness journey. We've got Legion's Gym in Clifton Moor and Better Gym at Energize in Acomb on board already, and more are on the way. Are you ready to make some good fitness choices? Then why not come along to an affordable and introductory session first by checking out meetup.com/menfulness and seeing what's on. Or visiting menfulness.org/safe space for more information. Hello and welcome to the Menfulness podcast. Thank you for being here and lending us your ears as we try to figure out what's going on with men's mental health and what are we doing about it. Before we get started, let's have some feedback from episode 6 with Pete. This is from Emma on LinkedIn. The very cool roller skater that is Pete Quinn has been sharing some very interesting insights on the latest Menfulness podcast. Menfulness is a powerful charity supporting men's mental health and well-being in York. Thank you, Emma. That's lovely feedback, and we really appreciate when people post about us on their socials. It really helps get the word out there, so thank you. And he was good, wasn't he? What a compassionate and thoughtful gent who we're very lucky to have with us on this journey. And speaking of which, here is another one, this time in the form of Wayne Cullen. Wayne and I are both coaches, and so we get into what coaching is and what it means to us. We also hear about Wayne's journey into coaching and what he's working on now, including his work with Menfulness and an introduction to his pioneering men concept. Wayne bravely and honestly shares with us about his struggle with the death of his brother and how he dealt with that part of his life. And so please be aware of that before listening if that might trigger something that you've been going through. Just to let you know, there's a few points in this conversation where the sound quality isn't perfect. A bit of interference can be heard a couple of times, so apologies for that. It's only a few seconds, and it doesn't affect hearing what we're saying, and we definitely will keep working to improving the sound, so stick with us. And as always, your feedback and contact keeps us learning and improving. Am I asking the right questions? Have I got the right guests? Could I push a little deeper? Am I missing something? Feedback always welcome, so please do get in touch. Following this, why not check out Wayne's website at waynecullen.com or consider having his 3 free sessions via menfulness.org/coaching. For now, though, here's Wayne. Wayne, thank you very much for coming today. It's good to see you.
Thank you.
You're very welcome here. Thank you also for everything you've done for Menfulness. You are one of our coaches, and I've been coached by you myself. I've had my 3 sessions and very much enjoyed them. We'll hopefully get to that a little bit later on. But I wondered if you could just first of all tell us a bit about yourself, where you're from, and how you found us.
Thank you. And before I say anything about myself, I know it's been mentioned before about the man cave, but this is definitely the most pleasant man cave I've been in. Both physically and mentally. So
oh, lovely. Well, I'll be honest, it's that nice because it's not really a man cave. It's been designed by the good lady in my life. So
well, that's what you need, a feminine touch.
She's allowed in sometimes too, you know. So
so I'm Wayne Cullen. I grew up in Kent. Hence why some people might think I'm posh, but actually I'm from Kent, and it's weird. It's weird, sort of having 3 young boys and seeing them have a mixture of a southern accent and a northern accent. It's quite comical. The whole Bath and Bath and that type of thing. So lived, grew up in Kent. I'm the youngest of 4 brothers. And mum, dad still married, and went to university in London. Spent over 10 years in London. Really enjoyed my time in London, and we ended up in the north really by circumstance, which is something we'll probably talk about a lot in our conversation tonight is we were looking to buy a house in 2005 in London. And we're looking on the day they announced the Olympic bid. And we ended up going to estate agents, and then within an hour or so of it being announced, all the prices were saying, oh, it's going to go up 20%.
Oh, God, no way.
So our option of staying in London was gone, and we ended up moving up to Yorkshire, to Malton. The link to this part of the world is Laura's mum, dad is from Malton.
Oh, I see, yeah.
And they are Roundtrees of the Roundtree family, not the chocolate side of it. They're split off
Right.
many centuries ago.
Yeah.
But so they are Roundtrees of Ryesdale, I think it is.
Cool.
So we ended up here. I ended up working for the University of Hull, and I did that for 10 years.
Right.
And that's how I ended up being in New York.
Okay. And how did you find Menfulness? How did Menfulness come into your life?
I found it really through. I remember speaking to Nigel Birchall.
Oh, yeah.
Who'd coached me as part of the York Coaching Circle, which is something that is run by someone called Zoe Birch, and it's linked in with an organisation called Coaching York.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got to know Nigel, and we were chatting, and Nigel knew Jack, and Nigel said, this is going on. So we ended up going to the first meeting. And we both were sat there and thinking, okay, this is really interesting, but how would coaching fit into something like this? And we weren't sure. And I sort of left it for a while. And then over time, as my own journey in coaching grew, and my own curiosity grew, I thought, well, how could I use it? How could I serve Menfulness? And so I then thought, well, maybe coaching could work in that space.
Yeah.
And then I made contact with Jack and said, this is what I'd want to do. And then I got to know you, and
Amazing.
And then so that's how.
So you'd already been coaching for quite a while by this point, hadn't you?
Yeah. So I started coaching clients back in 2018, and then Menfulness started. Was it 2019?
A year or so later, yeah.
Yeah. So I'd got my curiosity up, my own personal journey with coaching and self development. And then through Nigel, I discovered what Menfulness, Yorkie Dads was what existed then.
Yeah.
And then, but this idea of men's mental health and how can we support them was born in that meeting.
It seems like it seems like a great match, really, doesn't it? Men kind of getting together, being in a safe environment where they can be honest about who they are. It's kind of what coaching does.
Mm.
And Nigel is, of course, a great coach, and he introduced me to coaching in my employment. Yeah. So that's how I know Nigel. But it sounds like you've sort of been involved with Menfulness right from the beginning, really, in one way or another.
Sort of sometimes on the outside looking in.
Yeah.
And I suppose, the more I see what you guys do, the more I think I can really help you out here.
Yeah.
And I know we later on we'll talk about maybe some of the barriers to what coaching is and that a bit later. But my sort of curiosity was increased by intensity in what you guys were doing. And it's a very unusual thing for guys to be wanting to help other guys share space and create that safe space for just bringing people together. And it was,
I mean, it shocked us all, I think, in in that we've not really expected anything. Everything's been usually brought to us by someone, or one of us has had an idea, or it's been something that we'd really be keen on. And as we've done it, blokes have really responded to it. So even though it doesn't feel normal and it does sometimes feel like a radical thing, it also, there's appetite for it everywhere, and it seems natural when it happens. And so I think, that's why I do feel, that it suits the coaching model. So like I say, I really appreciate that you came on board when you did. I think what you offer, just to let the listeners know, is 3 free sessions with you to work on progress and self-development with you, and then following that, if they want to continue that relationship, then they can do that. But if not, then 3 sessions is enough to sort of really look at. Would that be a fair way of describing it? I probably should let you describe it yourself if you can.
Yeah. So the idea, I actually took the idea from a friend of mine who's a coach, and she works for a casting agency, and she did this through this sort of format through the casting agency, and they helped hundreds of actors, and this was during the COVID period, so a lot of actors lost their work, their opportunities, and so coaching was a great tool for them to have a bit of space to themselves, to be listened and heard without judgment, and to get some sort of a bit of clarity about what their next steps could be. And I thought, God, that could really fit into Menfulness. That sort of slightly different way of approaching it to counselling. And I thought, well, what if I just put that out there? It's something that I want to do, and if I can serve in that way and create that space, and in 3 sessions, it's not a huge amount of time, but if you can help someone just have an idea of what their next steps are, and that might be to go and get counselling, that might be to put more effort into a relationship, or even consider what they want to do with their job or their career. So you're not going to transform someone in that time.
It's quite a privileged position to be in, though, isn't it? As well, all those things that you've just mentioned there are such big things. But I suppose once someone commits to the coaching sessions, they're committing to change. If they're going to do this properly, the idea is there'll be some effort involved, but there'll be some change involved. Do you find that you have people have these light bulb moments, and that big changes that come out of these, rather than just people working on increasing better in their 5K time, or losing another pound? Is it people changing jobs and stuff like that? And
yeah, for some people it is. So for some people it is big change, but for other people it often comes from a place of insight of, oh, I've been like this.
Yeah,
this is how I've been being. Yeah,
like
and that self-awareness. Yeah. I've been holding myself back. I've been caught up in a story that I've had for many years.
Right.
And it obviously, the more you go into it, and if you had a much longer time with a coach, you'll start to see patterns, and you'll start to see how you're holding yourself back on the language that we use creates our world. The thoughts that we have creates our world.
Yeah.
And we all think differently.
Yeah.
And I know there's been talk of positive thinking, and that is, in the podcasts that you've done so far, and that is, a way of changing how you see your world.
Yes.
Is if you're having a particular struggle one day, well, what was good about it?
Yeah. So often we try and fix and we look at the problems, don't we?
So you do get people come. What often happens is people will come to counselling and coaching when they're desperate.
Yeah, right.
When it's like, I feel broken, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
But I need to change. I need to change something. I need to be heard and listened. And what really you want to do is get to a point where you don't get desperate. You start asking the question of, well, where do I want to improve my life, my work, my relationships?
So you don't need to wait until you're at some sort of crisis point.
Yeah.
The idea being is actually you could have a coach all the time.
But
Do people coach with you quite long periods sometimes?
Yeah. I mean, I offer various different lengths of time, but I'm working with someone at the moment who I've been with over a year, and it just gives that. I am there for her. I am there to call out her bullshit. I am there to be that non-judgmental human being that is just going to love her with all of her bullshit.
Yeah.
And help us, when she's holding herself back or when she's getting in her own way. Or
I noticed that about your coaching. It's very supportive. It's very sort of warm and safe. And I think blokes need that too. It's coaching. I mean, even my practice. Even my coaching is sometimes I know I can be quite goal driven and this and like what have you done, and it's cheerleading and it's goal setting and there's a place for that, but equally I did feel like there was a real environment for understanding yourself and not really beating yourself up, because I think that's something else that blokes do, isn't it? I'm not good enough today. I could have done that better. Why aren't I where I want to be, rather than where am I and what's good about that? So I really do appreciate you giving me those sessions, and I really do hope that other Menfulness members do listen to this podcast and take you up on them too. So what was your journey into coaching then? Where did that start? Where was your passion for it come from?
It's a great question, because there's a short answer.
No, we got time, man. We got time.
But in our pre-chat, I have my background, as I sort of alluded to in answering the first question of who I am. I spent 20 years in higher education, in various roles of support services, and some. So I was whilst I did my degree, I got involved in the bars, and I became a bar supervisor, and then became a bar manager, and then became a venue manager. And throughout that, I was working with and training and mentoring the bar staff most of them were 18 to 21-year-olds.
Was this on campus then, was it?
It's on campus in London.
Right.
And interestingly as well, because the London experience for students is so different to campus life at other universities.
Right.
Because London, you've got everything on your doorstep.
Yeah.
So spent 10 years in London doing that. And I think one of the things that I took great pride in was seeing an 18-year-old who may have only had a paper round before coming to university, but then they get involved in the job, and there's so many people I've helped in those years to help them with life skills and sort of help them grow in a different way to their education. And I think I've undervalued that throughout my life. But when I'm reflecting on, well, how did I get into coaching? What's led me to?
You were kind of already doing it 20 years ago. Yeah.
I was like, oh wow, yes, of course. It just looks slightly differently.
Sort of formalising it a bit.
Yeah.
And,
And often that is the story with people who get into coaching. They've been doing it all their lives.
yeah.
And there's a coach in America. He's a guy called Rich Litvin, who I when I get to book recommendations, anyone that's interested in coaching, there's a book that he's written with another guy called Steve Chandler that I highly recommend. But he talks about coaching as it's not coaching, it's leadership.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important as well. That, within ourselves, there is a leader within all of us. And coaching is very much, it's a tool, counselling is a tool, mentoring is a tool to help people.
You said it yourself as well. It's language, isn't it? We think with language, and a coach is using language to get the best out of you, and maybe help change some of those scripts. So Rich Litvin, is this someone that you've read? And
so he was a school teacher in London,
right?
And the one thing about coaching, where in the UK we're about 20 or 30 years behind the United States in terms of its development.
Yeah,
I think we're quickly catching up.
Yeah,
and this is one of the barriers that I think we'll talk about throughout the conversation. Is a lot of people don't know what it is in this country.
Yeah,
and in America there is a much more of a positive attitude of I demand this of myself.
Yeah.
And I want help.
It seems the same with therapy over there. People seem to be, there's less stigma around having a professional helping you through parts of your life. Dan won't mind me saying, but I mentioned to Dan about coaching. He said, I don't really know much about what it is. I've never had a coach. But yet he coaches rugby. He's been, he's done a lot of martial arts and kickboxing over the years. And so even though he's not had leadership coaching or life coaching, he knows what it means to have someone cheerleading you and spotting where your weaknesses might be and encouraging you and empowering you to make changes to those tweaks to your performance. And he was like, oh yeah, of course, there isn't a massive gap between those things, really, is there?
No, there isn't, and there's a lot of crossover. If you think of sport, because sport is probably the best analogy to use with it when it comes to trying to help people understand what coaching is. Athletes, the elite athletes will have numerous coaches to help them, and it's all about improving. It's all about performance. It's all about marginal gains.
Yeah.
If I can get that 1%, if I change my diet, or if I go to bed 5 minutes earlier, or whatever.
Yeah. Well, Dan was talking about Kaizen when he came on, that kind of concept of constant but gradual progression. Yeah.
Yeah. And you see it. I mean, I'm a big F1 fan, and one of the reasons for Mercedes' dominance of Formula One has been the attitude towards that marginal gains. If we can improve our sleep, or if we can improve how we relate to each other, it all has a knock-on effect.
So it's not all driving. It's not all the vehicles. It's psychology.
A lot of it is mindset. A lot of it's the psychology. How do you deal with setbacks?
Amazing. Yeah.
I think we go on and on about the impact of coaching, but of self-development, of self-inquiry, of growing that curiosity about, well, why do I keep on doing it like that?
Yeah.
What's behind that? And can I change that?
Yeah. It's a huge question as well, what you just asked. How do you deal with setbacks? So many of our blokes come to us with something horrible's happened. And it can be really hard not to follow the same patterns or go to the script or assume, the worst.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice? What do you find patterns when you're coaching that people come to you with similar stuff, especially in with male clients?
I'm actually, as you speak, I can feel my body tingling, because I have my own story around that, and it's not about, I don't want to give necessarily advice, but there a lot of guys think they get to a point in life where they need fixing, and it's not just exclusively guys, women, get to that point as well, and I've been there, and I still have moments where I have old habits and destructive habits that I keep on going back to when I have setbacks.
Yeah.
And that can be, this is not I have a bit of coaching and then I'm fixed.
No.
It's something you have to work out day in, day out.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is your own personal sort of will to say, well, how am I today? How am I going to show up?
Yeah.
And dealing with setbacks. And I've had plenty in my life. But then I look at my life and think, my life has been fairly average as well. So one of the biggest setbacks I had, or what, life's ups and downs. I mentioned that I was the youngest of 4 brothers, and I know before we started recording, I said that I would want to talk about this, and it is emotional, and so my eldest brother, it's going back quite a few years now, it's 1994, he died in a house fire, and I was 19 at the time, so I'm going through a pretty traumatic time in life anyway, because teenage boys,
of course.
So I was rebelling and all of that, and then this happened.
Man.
And so he was 25, and I mean I have a pretty poor memory, but as you can imagine, my memory of that day is very clear. I was actually in college, and my second oldest brother, Neil, he came to get me, and the teachers sort of, I got called out of class and had to go and see my brother in the reception of the college, and I knew something was drastically wrong, and then so dealing with that was extremely hard, and it was even harder because the other 2 brothers had left home. So Neil had got his own house, and Ian, he had actually gone up to university in London, and so I had to deal with the grief and my parents' grief as well.
I'm so sorry to hear that, man.
And that was,
can't imagine what your family went through.
It's really, it was really, really tough. It was, it never goes away.
No.
It never, even after all this time, grief, bereavement, you have to deal with it. Yeah. This is a hard thing in life. You have to deal with it. I spent a lot of time escaping through destructive habits of drinking and just wanting to really sort of, I suppose, very confused of life and very angry with life.
I can imagine, man. Yeah.
And so when going back to the question of advice, I think what I've learned, and I'm still learning, is the more we can deal with things And that dealing with things is not about manning up. It's not about putting on a brave face. It's got nothing to do with that. It's actually being able to sit there. I mean, I feel that in my chest. I feel the emotion there. I don't need to cry at the moment. I might cry.
Yeah.
But dealing with it is allowing yourself to respond in whatever way is needed in that moment.
Yeah.
And one of the things I have discovered with working with coaches who've coached me is that I can now. Again, I'm not healed and all of this. It's not about a place to get to. It is more of a place of coming from. I can now have moments, and I have had moments of just allowing the emotion to come out without any judgment, just allowing physically my body to release.
Yeah.
And it can be a real visceral experience.
Yeah.
But the power of it, and I've experienced this probably 2 or 3 times now in the last couple of years. It's just such a relief.
Yeah.
It's like a
Physical and mental.
Yeah, a cleansing of, oh my God, I needed that. I needed to get out. I didn't, and to not judge yourself for it, because a lot of emotion, especially for a man, when you're crying, you feel like, oh, I shouldn't be crying. I've got to be strong, and then it can be very mixed up.
Yeah.
But it's helped me, the coaching journey, and I think just obviously, no, actually, I want to say what I was going to say. I think I have grown into a much more curious place about myself, about my own curiosity of who am I, what makes me tick, what's going on inside me, not necessarily in my head, but in my body. What am I holding on to that is getting in the way of loving myself, loving other human beings, loving my kids, being me, being the inner child, all of those things that we all, I think, secretly crave for, wanting to be more like again.
Yeah.
And I remember when I had counselling, and this is going back a few years, so so that was one bigger life event. The other big life event was I've had 2 redundancies in my life. One was voluntary, sort of with your arm held behind your back, and the other one was compulsory. And in between those two, there's a few years in between those two. I remember in 2013 I had a mini breakdown. I say mini, I don't know if that's even I did judge the breakdown.
Yeah.
Who's measuring it? That's a good catch. And there was a lot of life things were happening around that time. So I had a slip disc. So I was in pain for about 6 months. And slip discs, I mean, I was on, I think, cocaine more, and it didn't really do anything because it's nerve damage.
Yeah.
And I did some physio, and it didn't work, so I ended up having to have an operation, which was thankfully successful, but I've just got all the stresses of that. At the same time, we moved house. At the same time, I had my second child. And then I went back to work. So got a 2-year-old and a baby, and my recovery was, I felt powerless, really powerless. And every time Andy Knowles, I know when he mentions his back problems, when he's I'm there, I can feel how debilitating it is. I mean, luckily I've recovered, but
You're still trying to be all these other things.
still
while
trying to
in
be this.
pain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I get very confused, very angry, very sort of like lost feeling of losing my power. So that happened. I recovered, but so after about 6 weeks, went back into work, was given an opportunity to go up another level.
Yeah.
But that also meant I had to do most of my old job, but also do this new job.
Right.
So there was all of these things happening at once, and I probably may have been suffering from depression low grade depression for some time, but then just this build up of life events, just bang. I stared down the big black hole.
Yeah. This was 20.
So this is 2013, 2014.
Right.
2014, I think it was.
Yeah.
And
That's
I again, it's one of those moments where I remember sitting in the kitchen thinking, I can't do this, can't cope.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the first time I've ever had that complete feeling of being totally lost, being totally sort of like, I can't do this anymore. At all, and I don't know whether I had suicidal or anything like that. I can't really remember, but it felt like I can't do life anymore.
Yeah.
And
that's got to be. It's got to weigh heavy, and you're still trying to be you're still trying to be dad at the same time.
Still,
you're still
and
trying
a
to
husband, and even now, and again, if we're going back to how coaching has helped me process that, it's helped because when you're sort of locked in your own head, and that sort of, you're not really aware of the impact you're having on others. And my wife still, there's moments where she gets flashbacks to have to cope with everything as I went through this.
Yeah.
And again, by working on myself and growing my own self-awareness and being willing to be curious as to why I am like I am or how I could possibly change, and learning to listen to others without judgment, which is a massive skill that we never get taught in life.
Yeah.
We've reopened these conversations, and I'm still processing it. I'm still processing that time. And
how long was it? Did you go on for? Would you
no,
say?
it wasn't. I think I would say, if I'm really honest, there was a regret that I should have taken more time out. I should have allowed myself to take time out,
because rest is part of the recovery process.
Part of it is. I think I needed space.
Yeah.
I think I needed space, and one of the things that eventually that happened in 2015, which so the story still continued into. I stayed at work. I was on antidepressants for maybe a couple of weeks, but I just didn't like the drug taking, the medication, and that was just. I'm not against it. It was just, it didn't feel right.
Was it the way that it made you change how you felt? And
I felt, and again, and this is where I regret to a certain extent. I wanted things to go back to normal.
Right.
And so maybe I didn't process it. Maybe I did counselling. That helped. That did help. And opened up my eyes a lot. And the counsellor I had, she was brilliant. Laura's mum is an ex-counsellor, so it was this counsellor was recommended from her.
And were you able to open, because you had a lot going on at that time?
I felt, but this is going back to a point of pure emotion. I remember in my counselling that I felt this pressure cooker of emotion inside me, and I remember saying, I am terrified that if I let it out, I would just disappear, explode. And it took me a long time to get to the point over the last couple of years where it's nowhere near as like that pressure cooker, but I suppose I found a release valve, and that release valve also comes with the added benefit that there's no judgment to it. And coaching's helped. I've a lot of creating space for myself to learn about life and learn about psychology and how the body can help us give warning signs to what's going on in our brain, because our brain is so.
You've talked about the physical side of it quite a lot, which again is not something that we learnt about or anything during my coaching training, but which I think is really, really interesting, especially having experienced sort of anxiety and stress and stuff like that. You asked me to journal, and you asked me to write down some of the stuff that I was experiencing and some of the sort of plates that I was spinning, and how it physically made me feel as I was bringing those things into my awareness. And it was just, I'd never been asked to do something like that before, and it is really interesting. If you really focus, you can actually sense a lot more that's going on internally than maybe you would usually look for. So it's really interesting. Where did that come from for you?
So my journey into coaching was after I was made redundant. I just needed to get away from office-based work. And I ended up working for Royal Mail. That's got to be the most different thing I could possibly do.
Yeah.
And it helped me, obviously walking, physical, that massive, but having that space to think and just get away from it. Element of escape there too.
Yeah.
I don't deny that. But then my sister-in-law, she's a coach, and she recommended this course. She recommended that I get into coaching. So I looked at the courses at I think it's at York St John, but they didn't have the numbers to run the course. This was in 2017, I think. And so there's another barrier. It is still really new, relatively new thing in the UK. But then ended up working for doing my training with an American company, the Coaches Training Institute. The guys who set it up, they're both actors, which I think has really shaped how they've done their course. And with actors, they have to be aware of what's going on in their body,
right?
In terms of the body itself, is the stomach I think it's got more neurons in it than the brain has.
Is that why there's a gut feeling? That sort of thing, right? Okay.
And there's for the science buffs out there, there is a lot of scientific research now in how coaching can help people. That the mind can change. Our habits can change. The neurons can be manipulated into creating new paths if we want it to, if we are going to put in the work.
Yeah.
A bit like muscles.
Of course, yeah.
And we can do that in our brain.
Yeah.
Our habits, the reason why we're habitual creatures, because it's nice and easy.
Yes.
And we've got the pathways in our brain are just like, always go to the fastest.
They do. That's
point.
why we fill in the gaps, don't we? And sometimes if they're negative gaps,
Yeah.
then we write those negative scripts for ourselves.
Yeah. So we're always looking for shortcuts,
Yeah.
and that's great, but that can get in the way. And one thing the body does, it gives the brain a lot more information of what's going on. And the more you get curious about what your body is saying,
Yeah.
the more you can think. So, a really common example is the feeling of nerves.
Yeah.
Now, I spent a long time thinking, I'm nervous. I'm going to mess up. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
But if the more time you spend with that feeling inside your body, you can think, well, what is going on?
Yeah.
And it can, so I got to the stage where I'm feeling nervous, and it's okay.
Yeah.
I want to express that because I'm not going to judge it, because all it is, my body's just telling me something's going to happen.
Yes.
That fight or flight response, I suppose.
Yeah.
And then you can frame it in whatever way.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it will be, I've got to get out of here.
Yeah.
Other times it will be, something exciting is going to happen.
Yes. That was for me, anxiety when it was at its worst was fight or flight, but instead of it being sort of nervous excitement about, say, going to an event with my friends there, it was doom and dread. It wasn't a million miles away. It wasn't that different. I mean, over time it became more and more like panic, but certainly for a while it was a subtle change. But it was that there were a lot more signs than I probably, for a lot longer than I probably listened to, around that drop in the stomach, that elevated heart rate, that shallow breathing, that sort of, like you say, fight or flight, evolutionary, that we kind of put to one side, or it was probably the coffee I had, or you know what I mean? This is just nerves, rather than what really is this, and what does it mean something?
Yeah. And that one of the gifts of us humans is our ability to tell stories. And if you look around your little world and then the bigger world, what is it based on? It's based on stories, beliefs and stories.
Yeah.
The downside of that, and I'm a great believer in your strength, or it will always have a dark side, always have a weakness there, that we need to just grow awareness of, not judge, but just grow awareness of. How is that? How could that possibly get in the way? And our stories will often get in the way of what's really going on.
Yeah.
So that, going back to that feeling in your body, if you can, you've got to consciously do it. It's not going to happen overnight. You've got to sort of really slow down your thinking, because you're thinking, well, is this where the stories come from?
Yeah.
And if you can, I suppose it's mindfulness.
Yeah.
You can get into your body and say, what's going on? And just ask that question of what's going on.
Yeah.
And over time, you'll start to notice that there is a difference between the story in my head and actually what my body is telling me.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I guess you've really got to give yourself space for that, because a lot of blokes, me included, will go, I don't feel right, I'll run. I don't feel right, podcast. I'll put that tune on really loud that I like. I'll sort of watch that TV episode. To actually sit with your feelings. It's terrifying. But no, it's not. It's not the norm for everyone.
No, it's not. And this is a stigma. We're talking about the stigma of mental health. And I was listening to the podcast he did with Pete Quinn, and the amazing work that he does. And then it got me curious about stigma. So, what is the stigma?
Yeah.
And who creates it? And how can we change that story, change those beliefs? And it is down to us.
Yeah.
Especially men, it is down to us we've got to do that brave thing sometimes and go inside. And then once go inside is then have that courage to to then share it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be this end of the world type of experience.
No.
Which I think I suffered, as I said, I suffered from, bottle it up, to the point where you just feel like you're going to explode.
Do you think you bottled it up because you were trying to protect your family, or was it because you were worried about your job? Or, I mean, you mentioned that you thought you might physically explode. You might disappear, I think you said. I mean, that's a really, you have such an articulate way of putting things. It sounds such a traumatic time. I didn't want to move you on from that too quickly. I wonder, how did you come out of that? How did you learn to talk about that and let that out?
I'm pausing there because I don't want to just go straight into an automated answer. And again, that's a really important thing when you do want to work on yourself, or you work with someone, is silence is such a powerful thing. I think if I go back to how I dealt with Stephen dying, it was a lot of anger, a lot of, I just want to obliterate myself with drinking and whatever else, and I'm really confused and not really knowing. And I know I'm a curious human being. I know that I might see things differently. I know that I'm creative, but I spent a long time denying that knowledge, I suppose, and that part of me that wants to actually find a much healthier way of dealing with this. And it wasn't until, say, the last few years where I've taken time to learn about what makes me tick, how humans work, what are the myths and the stories that we are telling ourselves. What do I need to do to break down that barrier in me? And I suppose what is maybe underneath all of that is, I believe we all have a gift. We're all good at something, even if we don't know what it is. And I think I found my gift in not only being able to share what's going on for me, but I'm growing that gift in helping others do the same, because there's only one person that is with you all the time. That's you.
You seem quite, I forget what word you used. I think it was no judgment. I think you said you can find a way to not have any judgment when you talk to clients. I wonder whether or not you're able to do that with yourself, and if so, at what point in your journey did you realise that? Because that's something I struggle with a lot, and I think I'm not alone in that actually I'm my worst critic. I'm not very good at accepting my emotions. I'm not great at handling criticism, because it usually amplifies what I'm already doing to myself. That inner child that doesn't feel good enough is so prevalent all the time. And actually, it sounds like a superpower when you say no judgment. Can you give that to yourself as well as to your clients?
It's when I say no judgment, it's something that you have to really work at. Your ego is always present. If I'm with a client, I will be trying to be in their world as often as I can, and if my ego pops up and starts making little judgments about how I'm doing in a session, or what do they mean, and can I actually say, well, I don't understand what you're talking about, that type of thing, or do I just carry on? And so you've got all of these little micro conversations going on, and the part of it is just allowing them. Okay, you've had your moment. I'm going to go back into their world, and I'm going to go back into allowing this conversation to be what it is, which is just a conversation between two human beings, rather than allowing the ego to come and say, how am I performing? What's going on? And spinning a story. There's another angle to this. With the client, you sort of learn, you've got a safe space where you can have that nothingness, that no judgment.
They told us park your shit.
Yeah,
before a session.
Exactly. Yeah. I think one of the tougher challenge is, yes, on yourself, but then when you're in your day to day, looking at people.
Road rage.
Road rage. Yeah, just about you.
Were you going to say that?
Just about to say road rage.
Man, I'm terrible.
Yeah. And right, so let's go with the road rage, because I think most of us do it. And I believe I'm the best driver there is. Better than
you can't be. I am.
Yeah. Better than Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen. But it's really curious when I still do it. But I suppose I've got an awareness around, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Because the only person I'm really affecting is me. And if we've got the family in the car, they could be affected by it.
Yes. So
it's the hardest thing is doing it in the everyday and seeing. Brené Brown mentioned a really good way of looking at people is I can't remember the exact words, but it was like they're doing the best they can with what they've got. And that sort of, I think what I try and do is try and meet people where they're at.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is, I don't know what's going on in your world.
Yeah.
I don't know how you've got to where you've got to.
Yeah.
I don't know your background, how you're brought up, the beliefs that you have, the problems that you might be carrying.
Yeah.
But if I can meet you just where you're at in a conversation and park all of that stuff in my head and just be present with you, then it almost feels like there's half a chance of us connecting in a far deeper way than if we come at each other from, look at you, why are you like that? What's wrong with you? Or
100%.
Yeah, that type of thing. And I think that's hard. That's the harder one.
As well, I remember talking about the idea that once you let the chimp take over, when we've all got it, because it's natural for us, whether it's self-preservation or remaining in the pack or whatever these evolutionary things are still sticking around. That it's not helpful in current society for us to do it. Like the idea was that if you lose your keys and you realise you're going to be late, then chimp mode takes over. But when it does, you look in the same place again and again, and where are the fucking... and you're not in the best state of mind to actually find your keys anyway. Yeah. So actually, you need some sort of time between losing them and losing it. Yeah. To a space to go, right, that's, if I go down that route, I'm not going to be in the best frame of mind for my own performance. But it's just finding that gap, we go too quickly to chimp mode, don't we?
We totally do, and that's I think part of the human condition is how we're wired. And again, the more time you can spend on catching yourself when you're doing it, you're thinking, then you've got that choice of, do I really want to go to chimp mode and be a right bastard, or
yes,
do
I do.
And sometimes you just go there, and then I still have days where I can be in a right where
you don't say you're not this Zen thing at home.
I'm in my bunker.
It's good to know you're a human behind all that.
And I suppose the difference I have now is I've got more self-awareness physically. So if I'm having a dark day, I can feel like I'm frowning. I can feel that there's less light coming in. And I remember bringing this up in a coaching session with someone. And they were like, oh, wow, that's exactly how I see it. Yeah. And it almost like gave it that, I suppose, that shared thing. It gave them that awareness of, all right, okay,
I'm not the only one.
I've got that, and then you can choose, to change it. And so nowadays, one of the things that I do when I've caught myself in that chimp place, that dark place, put some music on, listen to watch something funny on YouTube, and it just
positive content,
positive, just gets you out. And again, going back to that body of, a laugh or a dance, or it can just get you out of whatever's going on, whatever thought cycles you've got attached to. And again, the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And then now I embarrass my kids with my dad dancing in the kitchen. And
oh, I'm glad this is a podcast. He's doing it. He's doing it now, everyone.
and I love it. And even I would say the simple. I say it's simple, but the experience of reading stories to my kids, I've gone from not being terrified, but not wanting to do it, and being I do like that, to now I do silly voices, and and it's all because I've allowed myself to be less stuck in the chimp mode, judging myself and everyone around me, to actually think, you know what, who gives a fuck anyway? What if I prat around? Or
I think having Luna has definitely given me a new sense of being present. I'm able to forget my to-do list. I'm able to forget who I'm letting down and what I should be doing, or what goals I've not achieved, or whatever it might be. All that can melt away with time with kids, even other people's kids. Just children bring out that kind of presence, don't they? And I'm fascinated what you say. I mean, I think what coaching has done for me has helped me to make progress despite the self-limiting beliefs, and despite the anxieties, and despite everything. But what's next for me is turning it into the ability to give myself more of a break. And that definitely feels, like you say, it's more of a practice. It's not a set that goal and do it regardless of whether you think you can do it. It's set that goal and actually start to learn to believe you can do it regardless, and I think that's it's really good to hear that the experience you've had. I mean, how long have you been coaching altogether now then? Sort of
4 years.
Yeah, so it's not even that long, and you've built yourself a practice. You've got these different clients that sound like they've been with you for long periods. They must be getting so much from you to stay with you for such a long period of time. What a privileged position you find yourself in to witness people's progress and play a part in that.
It is. It is magical. It is about the relationship. Going back, we all have a gift, as I've said, and I think coaching is a gift to yourself. It's as well as counselling is a gift, or therapy is a gift. And I'd encourage anyone to get curious about any of those.
Yeah.
Those
it's the
support
best
services,
decision I've ever made is the coaching. I mean, it's quite a forward thing from the organisation I work in to train their own counsellors rather than bring them in. But as we've kind of touched upon, as well as being able to help somebody else, like the amount of awareness. It's a different life becomes a bit different when you can look at yourself from a different point of view, rather than what do they call it? Rather than having a outside in experience where you're walking through life and sort of having to deflect the stuff that's thrown at you. Spend more time trying to sort of give out what you've got to offer.
So what I'm hearing in that is there is with growing self-awareness, with coaching, there is an element of where you're asking yourself, well, what do I want to create? You know, what life do I want to create? And who do I want to be in that life? I could be a victim of life, and most of us are wired to be a victim. The world is happening to me. And I like the question of what does life, instead of asking what life wants, what you want from life, is what does life want from you? And in that is that, well, where you've got to now, you've created that. And you might be happy with it, you might not be. There might be things you want to change. And you have the power to change it. It might not be easy, but the only person that's ever going to change it is you. And it comes back to dealing with setbacks, the ups and downs of life. You talk about kids. One of the things they've taught me is just how naturally resilient they are. Far more than humans. It's comical that actually we, in helping them grow, we actually on some level stunt them.
Oh, 100%. When do we lose that spark?
And you're thinking, why do we do that? I don't think anyone really has an answer to that. But when you look at them, you think their bounce back ability is amazing. You think I need more of that in my life. I think it's something that we can all learn to do, is move out of feeling like life is happening to us and turning it around into that, well, what do I want from life? How can I get what I want? What do I dream about doing? Thinking, well, how can I do that? It might be still, I might still want to be a rocket scientist. Well, is that still possible? I don't know. But if we don't believe in the impossible, then the status quo will just remain. And if this room was made from people thinking, I can do that. And that's so powerful when you start looking at it like that. Thinking, I can do that.
I love it. That's perfect. I mean, what about you? Where are you right now? Do you feel like you've reached where you wanted to? You've got your own business. You're helping people.
I've still got a long way to go where I want to on the out there goal, which is something that we all get fixated on. I want to grow my business, to grow my practice. But I know that if I just see it as out there, I'll never really get hold of that. It's always got to come from within. So the more I can, and this comes back to serving Menfulness, the more I can serve the guys in Menfulness, the more I can share my gift with them, and hopefully they, help them uncover theirs. It doesn't really matter what's out there. Because you said sort of about definition of success and I think I could easily, as part of me, is like, I want this amount of money, I want this amount of clients, I want to be working with these type of people, and that's all true on one level. But the one thing I don't want to have to manipulate or lie or burn myself out trying to achieve that. My definition of success is to be able to love myself and help other people do the same, as we all do stuff.
Yeah.
We all follow our own stories of a giving, creating and giving back to the world.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you. Tell us then a bit about Pioneering Men, if you will, and what you've got going on at the moment, if you're comfortable with that.
It's. I think this is why I'm so keen to grow my involvement with Menfulness. Is I'm hoping from our conversation that the listeners will get an idea of who I am and how I see things, and I believe that men are truly awesome. I believe that men hold themselves back. I also believe that men are the loneliest animals on the planet because we choose to, because we're scared of actually of being able to just be present with other men. And I remember talking these ideas through with a friend of mine, and she said the only reason why women are better at communicating is because they've done it for longer.
Yeah. Do you think it's chimp? The same sort of thing? Is it that we're worried that we'll be cast out of the pack if we're vulnerable?
I think maybe I think if you go back through history, if we'd shown any weakness, we may have been alienated in the villages, or in the caves.
So we're kind of trying to fight against.
We're fighting against a lot of history of belief, a lot of. If you can imagine, you think about your belief structure. Where does that come from?
Yeah.
So mine. So I've got my beliefs from my parents, the teachers I had, and my brothers.
Yeah.
As my place in the family, being the youngest, and then you go back. So the beliefs of my grandparents, and you can go back and back and back, and then you've got society that's right. So you got all this, all of these beliefs and these stories. And I think buried amongst that is men. And part of the stigma for men around mental health is we're swamped. Yeah. We're swamped in this. We're meant to act a certain way. We're meant to believe it a certain way.
Yeah.
And I think we can change that. I really do. I think the more we are prepared, not just to talk and share, but to learn how to listen and be present with ourselves and with other men, we've really got an opportunity to find the strength in men. I'm not one of these people that wants to quash masculinity, because actually one of the biggest gifts we've got is our physical strength, our energy.
Yeah. It's a bit of a myth, isn't it, that sort of being open and honest and vulnerable and kind to each other is not masculine.
And it's weak. And I think that's bullshit.
Some of the stuff that these blokes are dealing with, the strength that you must need, you yourself to come through what you came through in the period of time that you were handling what sounds like a lifetime of difficulty. And to be the bloke you are now, like, that takes strength. That's not weakness, That takes strength to do that, and to be able to come here and talk about that. And so I think that does need reframing somehow.
Thank you for that. And I think the dialogue, the conversations that men can have, the willingness to be vulnerable, but not in as you're saying, it's not a weakness. It's not about necessarily showing emotion. The first step might be just telling a story, and that story could be totally made up. But be a bit of a glimmer of that is part of my life in that story. So Pioneering Men, the idea really is about bringing. It's very in some ways it's similar to what Menfulness is doing. Of bringing men together to a safe space where they can share. Pioneering Men, it does that but maybe it's just the next step of, all right, I've dipped my toe in the water. Now I want to put my foot in it and see how far I can go, and what it would be like to start challenging the way I think and challenging other men, holding people to account of, you say you want to do this.
Accountability is huge, isn't it?
But you're not doing it. So so there's a dissonance there between the two. There's something not quite right, and then
it really helps to know that somebody else is either behind you or going to be asking. You know, it's the same with some of the meetings. You know, you come in next month. It might be really hard to walk through that door. If you know someone's expecting you to be there next month, and you say you're going to go, you've committed to somebody else. So I can imagine in those environments where blokes are maybe talking about what change might be like, and then someone else is saying, well, how's that gone for you? You kind of feel like you need to give them something.
I think it's really, accountability is really important, that you put it's accountability to yourself, because that's really the only person you really ever truly accountable for is yourself, and that's so having that someone as a reminder, like a coach or a friend, can be that reminder. You said you were going to do this, and you're not doing it. What's going on there? Again, without judgment, rather than most of blokes' conversations revolve around going to the pub, talking about football, and taking the piss out of each other. That's what we do. That's our safe. That's our safe space. We're challenging. So Menfulness, and where I see Pioneer and Men going, is challenging that into, well, we can do that.
There's still room for banter.
But I mean, we can also do that in safe spaces. It's just slightly different language. So it's not about, again, this when people think of being vulnerable and talking about stuff from the past, or how the relationship with their father, or it can be fun as well. You can bring fun into it, because you, as well as it being sort of, it might be emotional. So it really does come down to those guys who do want to hold themselves to account, who do want to get curious about, well, what if I did want to challenge myself, and see where that would take me. And I'm aware of, there are, again, coming out of America, there are lots of different type of men's groups that come out of various different sort of angles to pretty much the same theme. And I suppose the idea of why I call it Pioneering Men is because I think it's a land that men haven't travelled to yet, and I think we owe it to ourselves as men, and I know that women really want us to go on this journey, to actually go out there and start doing something that the majority of men won't do, because they're. I was going to say they're scared. On one level they're scared, but I think it's more of the status quo is so strong.
They haven't got the safe space to do it. That's what they need. And the environment needs to be right, doesn't it?
You've got to have people around you that are going to create that for you. Initially, and then you'll start creating it, and you'll become more willing and open to be able to play in that space. Going back to a coaching thing, we're talking about, there's various different models in coaching. But one of the things that once you created that space, that safe space, you can then start making stuff up. Games, you can play games in it as a way of provoking thinking, of challenging how you see things. And once you've got that trust and that honesty, you don't need to hide behind, different models of coaching, whether it's the Grow model or there's many ones, Arrow, and if you go through all the books, which won't mean anything to anyone. But I think the point I'm trying to make is what I love about what Menfulness are doing, and what I see Pioneer and Men becoming, is that space where men can get back to playing, and in that play, you've got that, you grow that support and that willingness to actually let a bit more out.
Yeah, that's lovely, mate. I'm really excited to see what happens with it. How can people get involved? You've got the coaching page on the menfulness.org website, but what about Wayne? You've got a Wayne Cullen website, right?
Yep. So go to website waynecullen.com. I've also got a YouTube website, which is I'm building up a portfolio of different videos.
Just search Wayne Cullen
coaching. This Wayne Cullen coaching in YouTube. And the Pioneer and Men is all part of my work.
Excellent. And we talked a little bit about we're going through and kind of trying to gather together content and songs and just trying to learn a little bit about each of our guests. So have you got, you mentioned Brené Brown, you mentioned Richard Litvin, some content that's inspired you or that's helped you, whether it be on coaching or any subject really, that you can recommend?
Off the top of my head, any books by Steve Chandler. He does some books on coaching, but there's lots of other books he does. Very accessible, easy to read. He deliberately wrote them in his words. I think it's for the workers. So it's all this highbrow language. It's just direct.
Right. It's not for coaches necessarily. It's for
he does some tailored ones for coaches, but there's a lot out there for.
That's cool.
There's one's called Time Warrior, which is all about time management and how we perceive time, and
that sounds good.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, they're all quite short books as well, so it's not too heavy. I'll send you a list of some of the other books that I would recommend.
That'd be good. We'll tag it onto the description. And I think maybe I'm going to call this segment For the Record, but we're trying to build up a little playlist on Spotify. So you've sent me a couple of songs. Can you remember what they are? I've got a happy and a sad one.
The happiness one is a bit of a random one because there were so many songs I could have chosen. But I think going back to the whole body thing, I wanted to choose one that whenever I listen to it, it makes me just so happy. And it's K plus D plus B by the Chemical Brothers, which is not one of the biggest hits. Most people wouldn't even be aware of it. But there's parts of it where I just smile and I dance, and it's just mind blowing.
Perfect. That's perfect, man. That's exactly the sort of tunes we want on there. So thank you. And the others, you've got a couple on there. Just needs a couple in. That's fine.
So yeah, the other two, both U2 songs, both relate to my brother's death. One, which I think it's a brilliant song and really apt for Menfulness. And in that, the lyrics are so straightforward, but so powerful in reminding that we're all one. All human beings are the same. We all breathe, we all bleed, we all have emotions, and that's just, when you listen to it and be fully present to it, it's just mind blowing. And the other one was actually is a song that Bonner wrote about someone who'd passed away, One Tree Hill. And actually there's a place in London called One Tree Hill, and I remember going up there on a bit of a journey, a bit of a sort of mission to go and listen to that up by that one tree.
Oh, that's cool, man.
But yeah, music is so powerful, and my tastes are very eclectic.
Well, that's what I wanted. It means so much. Music means so much to so many people, and I know that this playlist is going to be completely random, but I also know that it helps me understand the guests a little bit more. It gives us some, some kind of context to the people that we're talking to. Thank you so much for coming and doing this, man. For everything that you're doing for Menfulness, for everything that you're doing for men and their power and their progress and their, vulnerability. I appreciate you extremely, and I'm grateful to know you. And for being so honest and open, for sharing with me what you have. I really, really do appreciate you, mate. And I hope we can do this again. I've got loads more stuff down here, but we're already getting to an hour and a half, and people complain when they're more than an hour. So if you come back, we can maybe focus on coaching more specifically and tools and stuff like that. We could do more of these, couldn't we? So
yeah, definitely.
Let's do this again, man. But for now, thank you so much, Wayne.
Yeah. And thank you.